stop scrolling, because something just happened that XRP holders have been waiting years to even hear whispered. Ripple is being pulled into the US banking system through a federal pathway that most crypto projects will never touch. And if you blink, you'll miss why this could be the quiet switch flip moment that changes how institutions treat XRP overnight. Welcome back to XRP Insider Network. This is the channel where we connect the dots, separate facts from hype, and call out the narratives nobody wants you to question. So smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications right now, because the next few minutes are going to feel like an insider memo read out loud. And quick disclaimer, this is not financial advice, it's analysis and informed speculation. Do your own research. Now, here's the spark. On December 12th, 2025, reports broke that the US Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, yes, the OCC, granted conditional preliminary approval for several major crypto firms, including Ripple, to move toward national trust bank status. That wording matters. Not a license to be a normal bank, not FDIC deposits, not loans, but a federally recognized structure that can legally sit closer to the plumbing, custody, settlement, and institutional-grade rails, while operating across state lines once final conditions are met. And the reason this hits different is simple. For years, XRP wasn't just fighting price action, it was fighting permission. Permission to be treated like a legitimate asset by institutions that don't want maybe on the compliance checklist. Permission to integrate without waking up to a lawsuit headline. Permission to be used in corridors where risk officers don't tolerate ambiguity. And now, at the exact moment the regulatory temperature has shifted in the US, the OCC is basically saying, we're opening a door, walk through it if you can meet the requirements. But here's the twist that the average headline reader misses. This isn't just about Ripple the company, it's about Ripple's positioning. If you're allowed to operate as a national trust bank, you're no longer just a crypto company with partnerships, you're a regulated entity that can offer services institutions are actually allowed to touch, and that changes the conversation from should we to how do we. And that's where XRP enters the room like a silent co-star. Because the market doesn't reprice narratives when you beg it to. It reprices when it senses a structural upgrade. Now let's rewind to why the timing feels almost too perfect. The SEC's long war with Ripple is widely seen as effectively resolved in 2025, with reporting in August 2025 that the SEC ended the lawsuit and Ripple agreed to pay a $125 million fine while appeals were dropped, cementing the split that secondary market sales weren't treated the same as certain institutional sales in the court's framework. That matters because the moment the legal fog lifts, the next question becomes, who moves first? Banks, funds, or payment networks? And right when that fog cleared, we started seeing the other dominoes wobble. ETF momentum, banking charter talk, and fresh institutional-style adoption headlines that look boring until you realize boring is exactly what institutions like. For example, just days ago, Ripple announced Amina Bank as a first European bank adopter for Ripple payments for cross-border payments. Another, it sounds corporate headline, that actually signals the exact kind of usage institutions want. Controlled, regulated, and measurable. Now stack these pieces like tiles, legal clarity in 2025, expanding payment adoption, and then US trust bank progress through the OCC. That's not random, it's a pattern of de-risking the Ripple ecosystem from the top down. And here's where the insider energy comes in. Because if you wanted to build the perfect runway for XRP to be taken seriously by big money, you'd want three things to happen in a tight window. 1. Reduce legal uncertainty. 2. Expand compliant infrastructure. 3. Create investment access vehicles that let institutions buy exposure without wrestling private keys. That third piece is where ETFs become the stealth accelerant. Reports in December 2025 have highlighted that XRP is edging toward additional US spot ETF progress, including exchange steps that move proposals closer to potential launch. And whether you love ETFs or hate them, you can't deny the behavioral effect. ETFs normalize an asset. They turn weird internet token into line item on a terminal. They create a buy button that compliance departments can sign. And when you combine an ETF pipeline with banking infrastructure progress, you get something that feels less like a speculative trade and more like a financial product ecosystem. Now, before anyone screams moon, let's be real. Markets don't move in a straight line. XRP itself has been volatile in late 2025, with mainstream market coverage noting XRP around the low single digits during broader crypto swings. So the point isn't price goes up tomorrow. The point is the why behind the structural story. Because if the OCC is truly letting multiple crypto firms, including Ripple, move toward national trust bank status, we're witnessing a shift where the US isn't just regulating crypto, it's absorbing parts of it. And if that's the case, then ask yourself this: why would they absorb the companies that can run payments, custody, and settlement, unless the system is preparing for a future where tokenized value moves like information? Now here's the part that's going to make some people uncomfortable. There are two ways to interpret what's happening, and both could be true at once. Interpretation. A is optimistic. Ripple navigated the war, built the rails, and is now being let in because it fits what the next generation of finance needs: fast settlement, lower friction, cross-border value transfer, and regulated custody options. Interpretation B is darker. The system doesn't embrace outsiders, it domesticates them. It brings them inside frameworks where they can be monitored, controlled, taxed, throttled, and used as infrastructure, while the public argues about price candles on social media. And that's why I keep saying this channel is about connecting dots, because the truth often lives in the overlap. You can have a legitimate adoption story and still have a power story running underneath it. The OCC approvals were conditional, meaning these firms still need to meet capital, governance, and risk management requirements and complete a final evaluation before full approval. That's the official reality. But the narrative reality, the thing the market eventually prices, is that Ripple is being treated like it belongs in the room with entities that operate in regulated finance. And look at the political tone around crypto in 2025. Major outlets describe the broader push to reform US crypto policy and the administration's more crypto-friendly posture, with traditional banking groups pushing back. Translation: there's a fight happening, but it's no longer crypto versus the government. It's old banking gatekeepers versus new regulated entrants. And in that type of fight, the winners are usually the entities that can do two things at the same time: comply and scale. Ripple has been building for that exact chessboard for years. Payments messaging, liquidity tools, custody, stablecoin strategy, partnerships, and now the idea of a nationally recognized trust framework. Now let's talk about the three signals that XRP insiders should watch that most people ignore because they're not sexy. Signal 1. Institutional Rails upgrades. When you see trust bank language, custody expansion, prime brokerage talk, or regulated settlement services, that's the boring stuff that precedes big flows. Signal 2. ETF mechanics and listing steps. The ETF story isn't just approval, it's also market maker readiness, liquidity sourcing, and how the product is structured. Signal 3. Real payment corridor proof. A bank using Ripple payments is not the same as a meme coin trending. One is a signal that compliance teams signed off. Now here's the spicy part. If those three signals converge, the market can re-rate XRP from legacy lawsuit token to institutional utility token with regulated on-ramps. That doesn't guarantee price, nothing does, but it changes the kind of buyers who even consider taking a position. And when buyer identity shifts, the entire volatility profile can shift with it, because institutions don't trade like retail. They allocate, they hedge, they ladder entries, and they use products like ETFs and custody solutions, so they don't have to touch the messy parts. Which brings us to the question that's going to dominate 2026. Is XRP being set up as a neutral bridge asset in a multi-chain, multi-stablecoin world? Or is it being positioned as a controlled component in a future where cross-border settlement is tokenized but permissioned? This is where I want you to drop a comment. Are we watching organic adoption or a managed integration? And if you're getting value from this breakdown, hit like and subscribe, because the next section is where we zoom out and talk about what could happen next, what could derail it, and why the loudest narratives you hear about XRP might be missing the only story that matters. All right, let's zoom out and get painfully honest, because the fastest way to get wrecked in crypto is to confuse a powerful narrative with guaranteed outcomes. So here's the balanced framework. There are bullish routes, bearish routes, and sideways but transformative routes, and XRP could travel any of them even if Ripple keeps stacking regulatory wins. Start with the bullish route. If Ripple clears final OCC requirements and fully operationalizes a national trust bank structure, it becomes easier to offer institution-friendly custody and settlement services under a federal umbrella, which can lead to more integrations where counterparties aren't terrified of reputational risk. In that world, ETF progress could amplify the effect by making access frictionless for new categories of capital, while payment adoption headlines like Amina's role signal that regulated entities are willing to use Ripple's rails in production-like settings. The result isn't necessarily a straight-line pump. It's something more dangerous to skeptics: normalization. And normalization is the enemy of the XRP is dead narrative. Now the bearish route. Conditional approval is not final approval, and regulators can tighten conditions, slow timelines, or shift priorities. Banking lobby resistance is real, and if the old guard successfully frames crypto trust banks as a systemic risk, you could see harsher constraints that reduce the economic upside of the charter. Wall Street Journal. Add to that the possibility of broader market risk-off sentiment. When macro goes ugly, crypto often bleeds first, and late 2025 has already shown how quickly major coins can swing with rate expectations and market nerves. So yes, even with good Ripple news, XRP can dump, because the market is a mood ring in the short term. Then there's the third route, the one most people don't talk about because it doesn't make for flashy thumbnails. XRP stays volatile or even range-bound for stretches, while the infrastructure quietly matures underneath. This is where the conspiracy-flavored speculation starts. Not as a claim, but as a question. What if the endgame isn't to make retail rich, but to build a settlement layer that can be used whether XRP price is euphoric or boring? In that world, the system doesn't need XRP to moon quickly. It needs liquidity, reliability, and regulatory compatibility. And that's why the trust bank angle matters. It suggests a future where crypto-native firms become regulated service providers, not just token issuers. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. The Ripple SEC saga left scars, and even with the 2025 resolution reporting, institutions remember drama. The bullish argument is that closure unlocks adoption. The skeptical argument is that closure simply unlocks structured containment. Meaning, regulators and financial institutions might prefer a world where crypto value transfer happens through heavily supervised corridors, trust banks, ETFs, permissioned integrations, so the freewheeling side of crypto gets gradually fenced in. That doesn't kill XRP, but it changes what XRP becomes: less rebel asset, more regulated conduit. And here's where you, as an XRP watcher, should be hyper alert. The narrative war in 2026 will be fought over definitions. If XRP is framed primarily as a commodity-like asset used for settlement utility, the ecosystem gets oxygen. If it's framed primarily as a speculative token that needs constant retail hype, it gets suffocated by cyclical sentiment. That's why real integrations, banks, payment providers, regulated custody matter more than influencer noise. Now I want to give you a practical insider lens checklist. No financial advice, just how to read the signals without getting emotionally played. Watch for finalization steps after conditional approvals, not just headlines. Watch for ETF listing approvals and actual launches, not just filings. Watch for corridor announcements that name regulated entities, and watch for the language shift in mainstream outlets from crypto token to payments infrastructure. Because when language changes, capital follows. And if you want the punchline of today's episode, it's this. XRP's most important battle may already be over, the battle to survive the legal era. And the new battle is about who controls the rails. If Ripple becomes a regulated trust-style operator, and XRP gains broader normalized exposure through ETFs and compliant rails, the upside is obvious. If the same process becomes a mechanism for control and throttling, the upside still exists, but it may look different than retail imagines. Either way, you're not watching a meme coin story. You're watching a financial system negotiation in real time. So here's my final call to action. If you think the OCC Trust Bank move is a nothing burger, comment no impact. If you think it's the start of a system-level flip, comment switch flipped. And if you want more breakdowns that connect the policy moves, the ETF mechanics, and the institutional adoption signals without the fluff, like the video, subscribe, and keep notifications on, because the next wave of XRP headlines is going to look small, until it suddenly doesn't. Not financial advice, stay sharp.